Hello to all my dear followers. I'd like to welcome you to a new chapter of What if Naruto trains to become a Genjutsu master alongside Kurenai? At the top right of the screen, I've left a card with a playlist showing all the chapters of this fanfic in order. Please, I ask for your likes and comments so I can bring you more chapters. Without further ado, enjoy.
Naruto slapped his hand down on his alarm clock as he blearily rubbed his eyes. He sighed and stretched before standing and heading towards his bathroom. He brushed his teeth and washed his face before yawning loudly and leaving the bathroom. He grabbed his new clothes from his nightstand, where he had put them when he dressed for bed. He had 4 more sets in his closet. He smiled as he pulled on his dark gray shirt and pants. He tied his orange sash on around his waist and grabbed the leaf from yesterday before heading to his kitchen. He opened his cabinets and stared for a few moments before remembering that he had never picked up his allowance from the Hokage Tower yesterday in his team, not picking up a mission, and his excitement in meeting back up with Kurenai. He frowned as he realized he hadn't eaten yesterday and would have to go hungry for today too until he could pick his pay up for the D-rank mission plus his allowance. He closed his cabinet with a sigh and headed to his door as his stomach growled. It was a miracle it had never growled yesterday when he had been around others. As Naruto pulled his shoes on, he thought about going hungry, then realized that Kakashi was always late 3 hours. He would have plenty of time to pick his money up and grab some Ichiraka ramen before his sensei would appear at the bridge. With this in mind, Naruto smiled before leaving his apartment and heading to the Hokage Tower. Scene break. Naruto walked through the red light district, smiling at the few women around who smiled coyly at him and waved happily. He didn't know the meaning behind those smiles, but he smiled back and waved as well, just happy someone would acknowledge him. They had been doing this since he was 10 and he doubted they would ever stop. For some reason he didn't want them to. Felt good for them to smile like that at him. It caused a feeling deep in his chest to move as they continued to show their affection by acknowledging him. He didn't know what this feeling was. It seemed similar to what he felt when he thought of Sakura, but with Sakura that was more of a physical feeling, like his body wanted him to go after Sakura, but his mind and heart set him towards these women almost Kurenai's age. He blushed as he remembered what Kakashi had said yesterday about dating Kurenai. She was definitely beautiful and stirred feelings inside him that even Sakura didn't. These women who smiled coyly at him stirred it somewhat, but he didn't know them too well, and Kurenai had made an active point to get to know a little about him even over the course of only 2 days. Even though he had no idea what these feelings were, he followed them, and that was what had led to him pursuing Sakura. Of course, the fact he would be stealing her away from Sasuke, who had everything he wanted but threw it away, would just make it all the better when he would have the lovely Sakura-chan all to himself. He smiled as he thought of beating Sasuke at his own game, but then frowned as he thought of Sakura. He wondered why Kurenai would hold more appeal than Sakura. His body had reacted oddly to her body at the waterfall, and he still didn't know why that was. He couldn't like Kurenai more than Sakura, could he? He stopped walking just before reaching the market district and shook his head. No way. Kurenai was beautiful, smart, and strong, but she wasn't as cute as Sakura. Nodding his head in agreement, he continued walking again, entering the market district and becoming the focus of glares as he left his home district. Naruto noticed that he was actually being glared at less. When he looked around, he noticed that most of the people did not recognize him without his trademark bright orange. He pouted in his head as he realized that his favorite color had drawn their stares. However, he was happy with his new clothes, and the added bonus of less glares was definitely worth losing the majority of his favorite color. He did still have his sash to represent the awesomeness that is orange. He smiled brightly as he continued heading to the Hokage Tower. Scene break. Naruto walked up to the Hokage Tower and smiled up at the huge symbol of the Land of Fire. His eyes twinkled as he looked at the kanji for fire, standing at the top of the tower where his Gigi worked. His smile diminished as he thought of the old man who had been a constant within his life and helped him on more than one occasion. He thought of all those times when he had woken in the hospital after his yearly beating. No, it wasn't much in terms of physical beatings, but it was still depressing, emotionally, to be beaten on your birthday of all days of the year. He had taken the old man at his word and believed that he didn't know why they hurt him or why they glared at him. He had believed the old man explicitly and trusted him just as much. Upon hearing of his burden, subsequently learning that his Gigi had lied to him, He couldn't stop the thoughts that now whirled in his head about what else he might know about him that he was lying about. His parents, did they leave him upon learning he had the demon sealed inside him? Did they die trying to kill him when he was younger? Despite the ANBU doing their job, he knew that people had tried to kill him before. The Ki they exuded was more than enough for him to sense them when he got older. Or, did they love him but die during the Kyuubi's attack? Did they die trying to protect him from the village when he was younger? So many questions that he feared to ask of the old man. His normal personality was actually pretty close to his usual attitude. Naruto was a very hyperactive and exuberant child. However, he also had a dark side that no one saw. It didn't manifest in brief spouts of insanity. It didn't try to control him or speak in his head like he had heard of for others. No, this dark side simply took revenge on the populace by pranking for him or thinking these dark thoughts and keeping it from his happy persona so that the old man or the precious few people he had trusted wouldn't be worried about him. Now, he wasn't pranking anymore and his previous trusted people had not seen him in weeks, so his other side stopped keeping the ideas to himself and shared them with the happy child. Naruto was slowly losing the innocence that his dark side had kept intact. As a result of this, Naruto's eyes turned steely as he looked at the Hokage Tower. He wanted to get stronger to protect himself. Not the village, he just wanted to protect himself and anyone he liked, and he would become strong to do so. But he knew that he needed to study more and read more to learn because his teacher wouldn't help him, Kurenai and Kakashi couldn't, and he didn't want to trust the old man again just yet. His prankster side immediately began planning on how to gain the materials he would need to train. As this happened, Naruto was standing in a single spot for more than 5 minutes, a bad thing for him, as it would allow others to notice him even without his orange jumpsuit. A single civilian sneered at him as he looked at Naruto. He walked straight up to him and scowled at the diminutive ninja in front of him. Naruto came back to his senses upon seeing the man standing in front of him. He took a step back and the man smiled eerily. "Why are you standing around here, you brat?" The man said, growling out brat with unusual force. "Hoping because you are a ninja you can gain your power back?" he said. "Well, they will keep you weak. I am glad you are near Uchiha-sama, he will subjugate you," he said. Naruto smiled at the man and said, "Sasuke team will bow before my awesomeness. You just watch, old man," he shouted. Naruto completely missed what the man had been saying. The man looked at him like he was nuts before turning around and muttering under his breath, "Damn demon just ignoring me. I'll show him later." As he walked away, Naruto cocked his head to the side as he couldn't understand why the man would just ignore him and leave. He shrugged his shoulders and headed inside the tower. He walked inside the lobby and headed to the receptionist. He completely missed the sneer the assistant gave him before walking up the stairs. He smiled brightly as he approached the receptionist and said, "I am here to pick up my allowance." He never knew the woman's name because she refused to give it to him, even with all the years he had been coming here. The woman looked up at him and Naruto missed the flash of hatred from her eyes as he smiled brightly, closing his eyes in a squint as he did so. She did not even make any reference to his new clothes. She smiled down at him, but it was a sad smile. "I'm sorry, Uzumaki-san, because you have not picked up your check on the day that is set. I cannot give it to you." His eyes widened as he looked at her. He missed the spark of mischief sitting deep in her black eyes. "Just as I have told you the past 3 years, if you do not pick up your check on the appointed day, then it is given to the civilians," she said sorrowfully. Naruto's head hung as he looked at her. "What do you mean, Tabeo? You never told me that." He shouted at her, his normal Databeo making a reappearance from his high-strung tension of not having money to eat this week. He had missed his check before, but he had never been denied it. He thinks. The woman glared down at him. "Keep your voice down, Uzumaki-san. I have indeed told you this before. I will not have you disturbing our work, please leave," she said. Naruto's eyes squinted at her as he stared at her before he sighed dejectedly and hung his head. "Hi," he said before turning and leaving the tower as he knew that if he made too much noise the ANBU would remove him. Scene break. Naruto sighed as he exited the tower and looked up at the ledge that led to his Gigi's office. He could climb up there and ask for lunch from the old man, but he didn't want to talk with him just yet. His fear of what might be said keeping him from doing as he wished. His parents had always been a sore subject with him, and he didn't think he could take it if the old man lied again. His stomach growled again, and he looked down at his sunken stomach with a glare. "Be quiet," he said before putting his hands into his pockets and heading off to his team's bridge. Still 2.5 hours before his sensei should get there. Scene break. As he approached the bridge, he saw his two teammates sitting in their usual positions. That is, Sakura was sitting next to Sasuke trying to talk him into a date as he ignored her with turning his head away from her and closing his eyes as he feigned sleeping to anyone who could see his face. Naruto was about to announce his presence when he remembered his chakra control exercise. Again, he did not say anything as he sat on the opposite side of the bridge and began working on the same chakra control exercise as before. For close to an hour, he sat there trying to complete the same exercise. He saw a decent improvement the first few times he attempted to move the leaf, as it would stick for half a second before the leaf burst from his head as he finished releasing it from its initial position. Again, he continued getting frustrated with the exercise until he felt his control start to slip. He sighed and put the leaf away, deciding to try it again later. He looked up and noticed that his teammates still had not acknowledged him. He looked down. It hurt to know his teammates wouldn't even notice him sitting here for a whole hour. Granted, he was usually louder. He shouldn't have to draw their attention for them to at least greet him, should he? He scratched his head in confusion. The old man always talked about how teams would be like little families. That was why he was so happy about his team initially. Sakura was his love, and he would have been happy having her on any team with him so he could show her how awesome he was. Sasuke was a mixture of feelings. He enjoyed having someone who felt as alone as he did. However, Sasuke was such a stuck-up prick that he ignored Naruto's attempts to have a rival within him, even if he didn't realize he was ignoring him until they became teammates. It hurt to know Sasuke brushed him off so easily. Kakashi-sensei was perhaps the worst. For some reason, he felt he knew Kakashi. He felt familiar to Naruto, like he should recognize him even though he said precious little about his own self. Because of this, he had felt happy to have him as a sensei. However, it had turned into another disappointment within his life. He refused to teach them anything until he deemed them worthy of it and, despite Naruto's urgings, had remained adamant in that. He didn't feel it was fair like much in his life. Sasuke had a whole clan library he could use to gain knowledge and power. Even Sakura could go to the public library, somewhere he was denied because of his tenant, and gain the knowledge she needed to keep herself in shape until Kakashi decided to train them. Unfortunately, Naruto could do nothing to make Kakashi train him. As dense as others may claim him, he was not stupid enough to think Sasuke and Sakura were as stalled in their pursuit of knowledge as he. So he was stuck. He was quickly beginning to contemplate going to the old man again, despite his fears. He was brought out of his musings as Sakura finally said something. "Naruto?" she asked. Naruto raised his head to look at his teammates and noticed that both of them were staring at him with odd expressions. He smiled at them, happy they had finally acknowledged him. "Ohio, Sakura-chan, Sasuke team," he said. Sasuke merely grunted at him as he cast a look at his new clothes. Sakura couldn't answer as her eyes feasted on Naruto's new clothes and lack of orange. It actually looked as good as Sasuke's. Naruto cocked his head and looked at Sakura with a question on his face. He opened his mouth to ask a question when Sakura's face twisted into a visage of rage. "Are you trying to draw me away from Sasuke-kun?" she asked accusingly. Naruto's jaw dropped. Sasuke looked over at her with surprise flitting across his face. "It won't work. No matter what you do, Sasuke-kun is so much better than you. Right, Sasuke-kun?" she asked as she looked back at Sasuke. Sasuke grunted as if it was obvious that it was true. Then he turned back to feigning sleep. Sakura sighed wistfully before casting one more scathing glance at Naruto, and then turning back to Sasuke with stars in her eyes and beginning another rant to get him to take her out. Naruto's hands clenched into fists as he shook. A few tears escaped his eyes as a huge wave of sorrow passed through him. Without his dark side to soften the meaning behind their actions, Naruto's innocent side finally realized how horrible his teammates were as teammates. "Why?" he asked himself. "Why me? Why must I have to endure such hatred and ignorance?" he asked sadly before rubbing his cheeks and standing. He turned and began marching towards the forests of Konoha. Sasuke opened his eyes as he felt Naruto moving away, his normally composed expression completely dropping as he saw Naruto's eyes shining with unshed tears as he walked away. shock and sorrow running through his body as he looked at Naruto. Despite him being the dobe, he knew that Naruto and he shared a bond deeper than anyone could comprehend unless they experienced loneliness the likes of which they had. As soon as he saw Naruto begin walking away, he stood completely and looked at him with hardened eyes, his Uchiha pride standing forth as he looked at him. "You better not leave, Dobe. We need to take a mission today. You were already late today," he said in hopes of keeping Naruto here. Naruto didn't even respond as he continued walking towards the forests. Sakura stood and ran over to him. "Naruto Baka, come back here. Sasuke-kun told you not to leave," she yelled as she pulled her fist back and let go, pounding his head into the pavement as she had done so many times before to get what she wanted. Naruto didn't make any noise other than standing and stumbling almost drunkenly away from his teammates. "Baka!" Sakura yelled at him as he disappeared into the foliage. "We can't take a mission without you." Sasuke scowled and realized he had said the wrong thing, especially with Sakura around. He didn't understand what he had done to hurt Naruto so badly to leave. He had always been such a dense person that he never needed to explain his actions, as Naruto took it to be part of their rivalry. Even if Sasuke didn't show it, he did respect Naruto and, as a result, honored their rivalry. Sasuke turned to leave as they couldn't do missions without Naruto. Kakashi shined onto the bridge and looked down at them. "Sorry I'm late," he said. Sakura turned to yell at him, but Sasuke glared at his sensei and beat her to it. "I don't care about your stupid excuses. The dobe isn't here, so we can't do missions. Because you want us to only work on teamwork exercises, today has been ruined. Goodbye," he said before turning and leaving the bridge. Kakashi looked on silently as Sakura bowed to him before running off, though he could tell the gesture wasn't meant to be of respect. As his students disappeared from his view, he sighed before looking off in the direction Naruto had walked. "What am I going to do?" he asked to the silent bridge. "If Naruto no longer tries to keep the team together, what little teamwork there have will fall apart in no time. Sakura constantly berates him for the simplest things, sometimes even for something that she should praise him on. She hits him whenever possible and just plain ignores him." Kakashi mused. "Sasuke is just as bad, though I can tell he holds a grudging respect for Naruto's in-fight capabilities. He ignores him outside of that and plays his rivalry off as nothing important when it is actually completely opposite. I know Naruto isn't as happy and as dense as he acts, but I had always figured he would remain so around his teammates long enough to change them, as he seems to do to anyone who makes a connection with him. If Naruto continues acting this way, my plan to have him unite the team will be ruined, and I can't think of another way for it to happen." He shook his head and shined away, trying to figure out how to salvage his team. Scene break. Naruto stumbled through the forest as his eyes shined with tears. He stumbled through the brush and fell to the ground as he curled into a ball and let loose tears he had kept inside him for 13 years. All of the pain and ignorance he had suffered at the hands of the villagers came crashing down on his young shoulders. He cried his eyes out as his shoulders shook from the sobs coming from his weak frame. For close to an hour, Naruto stayed on the ground crying, wishing he could just leave the village behind and ignore them like they did to him. Once his sobs started to subside, he slowly sat up, his blonde hair full of twigs and dirt from his convulsions on the ground. His stomach growled, but he ignored it as he thought of what had happened. "I always thought we were a team. I thought we were comrades and would become close, but they just ignore me." He scowled for the first time in his life. "Those teamwork exercises do nothing but make Sakura and Sasuke become angry at me." He thought as his anger grew, Kakashi-sensei does nothing to stop them either. He remembered quite vividly that Kakashi would not step in and do anything beyond just adding an egg from yesterday. Even before, if Sasuke and Sakura combined against him, then Kakashi wouldn't step in until after Sakura had hit him. He frowned again, thinking of how much Sakura hit him. His previous feelings having been crushed by their actions, he finally saw how she beat him as much as possible. Sasuke was apathetic at best, and he felt that familiar pang of loneliness run through him as he remembered how Sasuke had brushed him off so easily. His normal ocean blue eyes seemed to turn to ice as he thought of his team. He scowled for the second time in his life as that thought crossed his mind. He would have to ask his Gigi to change the teams if he could not convince Kakashi to change something. This was getting out of hand, and Naruto was now fed up with it. He would no longer take his teammates treating him as if he was a puppy to be kicked around at their whim. He brushed his hair with his hands, removing the twigs from his blonde locks, and took a step forward. His mind set on what he must do when his stomach gave a particularly loud growl. Naruto blushed slightly and looked abashed before hearing someone say something. "Excuse me, we are using this training ground. I need you to leave so you won't get hurt," the voice said with an unmistakable tone of authority in it. Naruto walked forward a few feet and came to another training ground. One he wasn't familiar with, but he was familiar with 3 of the people standing in the clearing. He smiled brightly, despite the dirt on his face, clothes, and hair, while greeting them, "Ohio, Ino-chan, Shikamaru, Chuji," he said. Team 10 blinked in surprise as they took in Naruto's new clothes and less than fresh look. The Jounin was the first to recover as he looked over Naruto. Naruto's eyes flashed to him, and he could see the Jounin observing him closely. He almost flinched away, but, instead, smiled brightly looking at him. "Hi, I'm Uzumaki Naruto, who are you?" he asked as he approached the still dumbstruck Team 10. The Jounin blinked before smiling slightly at him. "Sarutobi Asuma," he answered as he took a puff from his cigarette. Naruto took this time to look at the Jounin. He was wearing a flak jacket just like Kakashi, blue pants and shoes, with his shins wrapped in tape just as his elbows were. On his shoulders, the swirls that accompanied every Konoha uniform stood proudly. His Hitai-8 was wrapped around his forehead, holding back spiky black locks reminiscent of Naruto's own hairstyle. The man's hair wrapped around his face in a full beard covering his jawline. A thin trail of smoke drifted upwards from the cigarette laying lazily in his mouth. His light brown eyes spoke of curiousness and no hint of malice. The oddest part of this Jounin, however, was the sash on his waist that had a single kanji in red for fire. Naruto's smile widened slightly as he saw that and turned back to the still confused Team 10. At least 2/3 of them seemed confused. To Naruto, Shikamaru seemed annoyed. Naruto smiled at them despite feeling uncomfortable under Shikamaru's intense stare. Indeed, Nara Shikamaru was, for perhaps the first time in his life, perplexed. He was used to knowing what was going to happen, his huge IQ allowing him to plan several steps in advance for almost any situation he had come across. He had yet to come across a situation where he could be caught off guard except with his own father. Thus, when Naruto, the class enigma that would always throw his plans asunder, the boy who was ever happy and constantly a beacon for good feelings, appeared in front of him with new clothes, a somber demeanor, dirt in his hair and on the side of his body, and puffy red eyes that should be shining with mischief. Shikamaru decided that he wanted to talk to Naruto. He did not find Naruto too troublesome, as he would announce to everyone else. Naruto would be the only one Shikamaru could count on to give him a challenge within any point in time. As such, when he noticed Naruto's out-of-place characteristics, his curiosity, something which had seemingly lain dormant all his life, sprang up and consumed his over-intelligent mind with a burning need. He glanced at his teammates and did not want them to be around when he questioned what had upset Naruto so much that he would show this to them. He discreetly signaled Asuma, using a hand language they had developed as the two played shogi, and asked him to please remove Chuji and Ino. His answer was a shocked look from Asuma until he quickly glanced at Naruto and looked back at Shikamaru before nodding and speaking up. "Chuji, Ino, let's go. I need to talk to your parents about something, so practice is cancelled for today. Pleasure to meet you, Naruto-san," he said before grabbing his 2 students and shining away. Naruto cocked his head to the side in a confused fashion, looking at the remaining member of Team 10 standing in front of him. Shikamaru's gaze intensified as he looked back at Naruto with piercing black eyes. Naruto took this quiet time to study Shikamaru. His black hair was in a pineapple shape upon his head. He had on a mesh shirt with a gray jacket over it. His Hitai-8 was tied around his left arm. His pants were blue, as were his normal shinobi sandals. His kunai pouch must have been somewhere on his back, as it wasn't strapped to his leg. As he was doing this, Shikamaru was going through thousands of scenarios of why Naruto would actually be showing his sadness. He knew that in his academy days, Naruto had been an unusually happy person, but Shikamaru could see the small hint in his eyes when someone would put him down or he would be ignored in their classes. The reason behind all of the prejudice had never really intrigued him, but this did. He wondered what could have possibly happened when he decided that it must have something to do with his team, or Irika. Is there something wrong, Shikamaru? Naruto asked curiously, no hint of hurt feelings hiding in his words as Shikamaru would have expected. Again, Naruto surprised him or was simply an expert at hiding his feelings. Shikamaru had a feeling it was both. I would ask the same of you, Naruto. Shikamaru countered, trying to get Naruto to drop his act. He was fairly sure Naruto had a serious side. He had caught glimpses of it when he would plan a prank. As frightening as it was, Shikamaru was scared of Naruto in his serious state. Despite not ever seeing it full-blown, Shikamaru knew what Naruto did, while serious, was far beyond what anyone his age should be able to do. Painting the Hokage monument in broad daylight and outrunning full-blown ANBU agents as well as a majority of the Jounin and Chunin of the village was no small feat and should be impossible for anyone not of the Sandame's prowess or Shikamaru's intelligence. Even with these, Shikamaru would be wary of attempting such an act and would only do it should he have backup. Naruto did it by himself and managed to get away from everyone except Irika. Shikamaru felt that was probably on purpose. Naruto's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly, but Shikamaru was no genius for nothing. He caught it as Naruto's grin came to his face. "Eh?" Naruto said as he threw his hands behind his head and grinned at Shikamaru. "Nothing's wrong here," he said as he grinned. Shikamaru narrowed his eyes as he crossed his arms over his chest. "Naruto," he said seriously, drawing Naruto's grin off his face at seeing Shikamaru serious for the first time in his life. Something he was curious about. "I may not be your friend, but I am curious about why you, who was the picture of happiness and mirth." Shikamaru started as he waved at Naruto's direction. A person who could laugh off any joke or insult and take it in stride. A person who wore "Kill Me Orange" and still managed to be inconspicuous when you wanted. A smile of pride came to Naruto's face from hearing what he thought were praises. They were, but Shikamaru had a point to make. A person who has never once shown any type of sadness or hurt from anything anyone has said or done to you. Why would you be out in the forest wearing new clothes and ruining them? Why would you be crying? More importantly, why wouldn't you leave before being found? Shikamaru questioned as he stared at Naruto. Naruto's jaw was almost hitting the floor as he looked at Shikamaru. His mind trying to process the fact that Shikamaru had deduced all of this so quickly. He suddenly chuckled darkly and looked at Shikamaru with a dark and haunted look that he reserved for only those villagers who tried to beat him now. It contained none of the malice that he usually had accompanying it, but the glare was still enough to make Shikamaru freeze. "How do you know so much about me?" Naruto asked, his eyes not the pool of mirth and mischief that usually occupied that space. No, these eyes held loneliness of a level Shikamaru could not fathom. And he answered almost instantly, hoping it would cause Naruto to drop his stare. It made him feel vulnerable. "I may be lazy, but that is just because nothing piques my curiosity. I am a genius of a supposed IQ above 200. Nothing ever catches my eye enough to make it interesting enough to warrant my interest until you," he said. It was quite big of his ego to say this, but it was no less true. With Shikamaru's mind, most things people considered impossible were some of the simplest things for him. Naruto's eyes lost the haunted look and returned to their mirthful nature, almost as if not ever having been there in the first place. But now, Shikamaru could see that spark of loneliness hiding deep in Naruto's eyes. "Glad I interest you, Shikamaru," Naruto said in a happy voice, and Shikamaru believed him. Naruto suddenly looked sheepish as he looked down at his feet and muttered so quietly Shikamaru almost missed what he asked. "I don't have many friends, Shikamaru. If you wish to know my story, would you be my friend?" A slight stutter entering his normally boisterous voice. Shikamaru almost face-planted at such a drastic change so quickly. But he was so curious it was unreal, and he was not about to let his target get away. So he smiled a lazy smile and put his hands in his pockets. "Sure, Naruto," he said as he smiled at Naruto. Naruto's eyes almost bugged out of his face, but silent tears began to leak from his face as he looked up at Shikamaru and muttered a small "arigato" before sitting on the ground with the largest smile Shikamaru thought he had ever seen. Naruto patted the ground next to him, and Shikamaru noticed he was motioning for him to join him. Shikamaru wasted no time in sitting next to his newest friend and current point of curiosity. Naruto took a shuddering sigh before starting what must be his longest single narrative in his whole life, the summary of which came almost 45 minutes later. In all, I tire of the villagers' glares, but I can understand why they would glare at me. That does not make taking their glares any better, especially now that I cannot prank them. It leaves me bored when Kakashi-sensei dismisses us from practice. If that is not bad enough, I can't study anything because the library says that I cannot get a library card because of where I live. So, I am stuck on a team with Sasuke, a person who ignores the many attempts I have made to have a working friendship with Sakura, a girl whom I thought I loved and now see she was just annoyed by me, and Kakashi-sensei, who seems to ignore me just as the rest of the village does despite being my teacher. He finished with a small frown. Naruto had refrained from telling Shikamaru about Kyuubi. He didn't want to run off his only friend his own age. So he made up a few excuses, such as the one about the library card for the library. He also didn't mention Kurenai's intervention as he didn't want something to happen to her. Not that he didn't trust Shikamaru, he just was hesitant to risk the only person he felt he could trust right now. Shikamaru and Kakashi were quickly making that list, but Kurenai had automatically been placed upon it by her actions at the waterfall. Shikamaru's mind was in overdrive. Denied access to the most basic of utilities? Lives in the red light district? A team that acts nothing like it is supposed to and completely ignores his attempts to create a working team. He glances back at Naruto as Naruto sighs wistfully into the sky. His life is fucked up and I will not stand for it. He still hasn't told me why the village hates him or what made him change so much. Though he did mention how he wouldn't take shit from his team anymore. I think he has matured a bit since the academy. Shikamaru thought, well, Naruto, I have to say that is one hell of a life you live. If anything, I am only more curious about you. Shikamaru admitted. Naruto beamed. I know you didn't tell me everything, but I think you are entitled to a few secrets. Naruto's head dropped in slight shame for not telling his newest friend everything. I hope you will eventually tell me, Naruto, he said, smiling at Naruto. Naruto's face shot up and he locked eyes with Shikamaru. Bright, happy blue eyes were reflected in happy black eyes as the two friends smiled at their newest companions. Suddenly, Naruto's stomach let out a small growl. Naruto blushed and Shikamaru blinked before smiling slightly. Would you like to eat at my house tonight? Shikamaru offered. Naruto immediately looked nervous and Shikamaru wondered if he had said something wrong when Naruto relaxed slightly and nodded his head. Shikamaru put the odd reaction to his question out of his mind and stood, offering a hand to his friend, who gladly took it. In almost no time at all, the two had headed towards Shikamaru's clan compound. Scene break. Naruto and Shikamaru were taking the outer rim of Konoha to the clan district. Naruto had started walking towards the outer part of Konoha to reach the clans, not wanting to be glared at with his new friend, and Shikamaru had questioned him on it. Naruto had just said he wanted to enjoy a peaceful walk. Shikamaru knew there was more to it, but he agreed and the two spent the time simply walking in each other's presence in silence. Neither felt the need to speak and neither spoke because of it. Normally, Naruto would be abuzz with energy, but his recent revelations and subsequent acquisition of a new friend had left him quite speechless and drained. Not to mention the fact he hadn't eaten in almost 3.5 days. So, he walked with a small smile on his face and his hands thrown behind the back of his head, while he walked on as if he hadn't a care in the world. Naruto had come to the conclusion that he would no longer make huge attempts to encourage his teammates. He would act as if he were not hyperactive, something he knew would be hard seeing as he always had energy, but he would endure so that his team either took the steps on their own or he was reassigned. Apart from that, he had decided to remain almost completely the same. He would tolerate the village's glares and become strong enough to protect himself and Kurenai. With a sidelong glance at Shikamaru and Kakashi too. He thought to himself as he nodded his head. Shikamaru was mulling over all the information Naruto had told him. He knew there was a big piece of the puzzle missing. But what? The main problem is the root of the issue which causes everything that has happened to him. But he doesn't seem to want to tell me. Shikamaru thought as he caught Naruto's sidelong glance. I will figure this out, Naruto. But in the meantime, I have a gift for you that I think you will hate. Shikamaru looked up and nodded. Here we are. Shikamaru said as he looked at the gates to his home. Naruto looked up at the gates and saw there was a wall surrounding the entire compound. The gates had the emblem of the clan emblazoned on them. Naruto couldn't see anything else about the compound. He shrunk into his clothes a bit at how intimidating the gates looked. He looked over at Shikamaru nervously because he wasn't sure how his parents would handle Naruto being his friend. On top of that, he was being invited into another's house for the first time in his life. He was taught some etiquette by his Gigi, but he rarely ever used it. He took a deep breath before smiling at Shikamaru, drawing Shikamaru's gaze. Shikamaru smirked at him and opened the door. The two stepped forward and were greeted to the sight of buildings in a U-shape facing away from them. In other words, the houses started on the left and right side of the gate and continued away from them until being connected by another set of houses that curved in a crescent, giving the appearance of an upside-down U. There was plenty of grass laying on the ground leading to all of the houses. Naruto's eyes were wide at how simple it was, yet it seemed so inviting. Shikamaru actually chuckled as he stood next to his friend, seeing his gobsmacked expression. Naruto turned to Shikamaru and snapped his jaw shut as he shouted at him while pointing at the houses, "You live here!" Naruto's response was a slight chuckle before Shikamaru started to walk forward. Naruto stood there for a few more seconds before, "Hey! Wait up!" he shouted as he ran after his friend. When he drew closer to Shikamaru, he noticed they were heading straight towards the biggest house in the crescent part of the houses. Behind these houses, Shikamaru waved at the houses, "Lay the yards for our deer to graze," he commented as he walked forward. He smirked as Naruto's eyes grew wide upon hearing this place was even bigger. Shikamaru stepped up onto the porch of his house and took his shoes off. Naruto quickly followed his example. Shikamaru walked into his house and waited for Naruto to follow. Naruto walked into the house and the door slammed shut behind them. He saw that there was a hallway leading further into the house with a flight of stairs on one side of the hallway. It was surprisingly bare. "Mom, I'm home," Shikamaru called out to his left. "Oh, Shikakuen, dinner is almost ready. Please go wash up." A woman's voice floated down from upstairs at first until the person who was talking began descending the stairs and caught sight of the two people in her doorway. Naruto looked up to be greeted to a woman who was obviously Shikamaru's mother. She had black eyes and hair just like her son, but her hair was pulled over her back. Two bangs, one on each side of her face and a single bang coming down from the top of her head. She was wearing a red dress with a white undershirt peeking out from her collar. Her feet were covered in the normal blue shinobi shoes. Shikamaru immediately started to speak when she appeared on the stairs. "Ka-san, this is Uzumaki Naruto." He trailed off as he saw his mother glare at Naruto. He began to sweat as he realized what that look was for. Naruto froze like a deer in the headlights when Shikamaru's mother turned a death gaze on him. He immediately seemed to shrink slightly as the thought of losing his friend because Shikamaru's parents held a grudge against him. His normally boisterous and rough attitude would have shined through and he would have left with a smile, but right now he just felt like crawling into another corner and weeping. He cringed as her mouth opened to speak. "We do not allow dirtiness in my house, Naruto-san. Strip and take a shower so you may join us for dinner." Shikamaru's mother spoke in a tone Naruto had recognized from Sakura. His surprise over the words coming from her resulted in an awkward situation as he immediately pulled his shirt off and was proceeding to take his pants off before he actually registered what he had done. Two soft gasps came from the room as they beheld Naruto's sunken stomach and the horrible state his body was in from malnutrition. He immediately recognized his mistake and was about to replace his shirt when Shikamaru's mother spoke again. "Shikaku!" she yelled. Naruto froze as his eyes darted to Shikamaru. Shikamaru was stunned at Naruto's body. His body was in a horrible condition and he had never seen such a bad case of malnutrition on a child before. As he heard his mother's call, he blinked at how fast his father appeared in the hallway. Troublesome woman. He couldn't stop thinking at how she had his father whipped. Yoshino herself was furious, and it shone in her eyes as they held a rage none but a mother could possess. She turned her head and yelled for her husband. She knew the perfect way to fix this. When he appeared underneath her, she simply pointed at Naruto and said, "Contact Chuza. Tell them we are having dinner at their house." Shikaku's confused look was the last thing she saw before he turned to look at Naruto. When he turned back, She shivered at the gaze he held. It almost matched her own. "Get them ready. Chuza will have it ready in a half-hour," he said in a cold voice before turning and disappearing back into the house. She turned to look at Naruto and instantly recognized the fear hidden beneath his eyes. Her anger abated somewhat as she looked into his soft blue eyes. She smiled at him and was about to speak when he said, "I am sorry. I won't come back. Just please don't punish Shikamaru," he stuttered out. She blinked a few times before smiling softly at him. She noticed Shikamaru's gaze that he suspected something other than what was on the surface, damn genius minds, and simply waved Naruto's apology off. "Naruto-san, we are going to eat tonight and you will be joining us. Shikamaru, please lead us to our hot spring and bathe so you and your new friend may be ready for dinner tonight. I will wash your clothes while you do that. Let's go," she said in a kind voice while holding out her hand to her as she descended the stairs to stand in front of him. Shikamaru muttered, "Troublesome," before starting to walk away. Naruto looked up at the woman and could sense no intent like the villagers, only a smile. So, he reached out and grasped her hand. "Arigato," he said as she began walking behind Shikamaru towards the hot spring with Naruto's hand in her own. He wondered, for but a moment, if this was what a child might feel like with their own mother. Naruto walked alongside Shikamaru and his parents, his freshly cleaned hair blowing in the wind as it dried. He had been scared when Shikamaru's mother had become so downright murderous, but she had simply had him wash and reclothed him before setting out for this Chuza's place. Honestly, Shikamaru's mother had been incredibly understanding and smiled constantly at him as they walked. It was nice, and he found himself smiling back at her as he walked comfortably with his friend's family. Shikamaru walked lazily next to his friend. He enjoyed seeing Naruto relaxed. Despite not knowing Naruto too well until recently, he still felt happy his friend was dropping that guard he seemed to constantly have. His sharp mind caught every flinch Naruto might have when he would be around Shikamaru's family. He had noticed how Naruto seemed uncomfortable with someone being so intimate as to wash him as Shikamaru's mother did, but he allowed it to happen, and now Naruto was starting to relax in her presence, as well as his father's. When they were close to Chuza's place, Naruto finally broke the comfortable silence that had been surrounding their walk. "Nah, where are we going?" he almost shouted, his exuberance shining through to his bright blue eyes. Shikamaru's mother turned and smiled gently to him. "To a friend's place, their food is the best," she said quietly. Naruto's eyes widened. "No way! Ichiraku's ramen is the best," he said as he pointed at Shikamaru's mother accusingly. Shikamaru and his father chuckled as Yoshino's eyebrow twitched. Suddenly a shout could be heard from the compound they were now standing in front of. "Oi!" A heavy-set woman came bursting out the doors, and the entire Nara family stepped back as the woman rounded on Naruto. "Who dares say my cooking is not the best in this village?" she shouted to Naruto. Naruto glared back up at the woman. "No food is better than Ichiraku's. Ramen is the food of the gods," he shouted to the now red-faced woman. The woman's eyes narrowed. "We'll see if you can keep that tune after you eat my cooking," the woman said as she brought herself up to her full height, and Naruto saw that she was wearing a purple blouse with golden trimmings, a pair of black pants, and heeled shoes. Her eyes had some coloring to the at the corners as she looked up at the Nara family and broke into a smile before reaching down and grabbing Naruto by the scruff of his clothes. "Let the lesson begin," she shouted as she turned around and headed back into the compound. "Close the door behind you, Shikamaru-kun," she yelled as Naruto got glimpses of a few doors before he was set into a seat. Naruto's mouth watered as he looked at the veritable feast in front of him. Shikamaru chuckled as he walked up behind Naruto. "This is the Akimichi clan. They have some of the best restaurants in the city, Naruto," he said as he sat down next to him. Naruto was still focusing on the food as the same woman from before and two males entered the room. "Shikamaru munch, so you're the munch guest tonight," Choji said as he looked at his friend. He sat down next to him and finally noticed Naruto staring hungrily at the table. "Naruto?" he asked between munches. Naruto turned to look at him with drool coming out of his mouth. "Eh? Choji?" he asked as his eyes returned form their glazed look, his stomach giving a large growl as he hadn't eaten in a few days. Choji blinked at his stomach's growl, and the older-looking Choji laughed heartily from the head of the table. bringing the young adults' attention to how Shikamaru's parents and Choji's parents had finally joined them. Naruto looked up and was set upon by a certain fear. Something he had forgotten to do nagged at the back of his head for a few moments before he suddenly stood up, drawing everyone's attention to him. He blushed and rubbed the back of his head before he bowed deeply and said, "Ojama Shimasu." 1. The parents' shocked looks were missed as Choji and Shikamaru stared at him oddly before Naruto raised his head to look and see if he did anything wrong. His etiquette lessons having demanded he do this. He was treated to everyone looking at him oddly. He almost started to panic when a smile came across Shikamaru's mother's face. "I don't believe we have had introductions, have we, Naruto-san?" she said quietly. Naruto smiled at her and nodded. "I am Uzumaki Naruto," he said boisterously, breaking the shock of his manners. "Nara Yoshino," Shikamaru's mother said as she smiled and elbowed her husband. "Troublesome woman," he muttered before saying, "Nara Shikaku, Akimichi Hamiko," the heavy-set woman from before stated as she looked at her husband eyeing the food hungrily. "And this is Akimichi Chuza," she said as she elbowed him as well, prompting him to wave at Naruto cheerfully before returning to stare at the food. Naruto chuckled at the man's attitude. "He seems a lot like Choji," Naruto commented as he smiled at the adults. That caused a round of chuckles. "Well, I can see we have 3 hungry people," Hamiko said as she looked at Chuza, Choji, and Naruto before continuing. "The only thing left to say is, Ida Kamasu." With that, the feast began and Naruto gorged himself as fast as he could. The Akimichi were a fast-eating clan, but they stared in slight disgust as Naruto shoveled food into his mouth as fast as he possibly could. That is until he suddenly froze like a deer in the headlights. "Naruto-chan." Yoshino began as she smiled sweetly at him, his danger senses warning him to remain in his seat. "Please eat slower or I will be forced to tie you to the chair and spoon-feed you," she finished as an Oni mask appeared behind her head. Naruto quickly nodded his head before sitting straight up and setting his chopsticks down. He chewed his food slowly, enjoying the taste of the food now that he wasn't afraid of someone taking it from him. Yoshino's Oni mask disappeared as her smile became a bit less frightening. "There, much better," she said before picking her own chopsticks up and beginning to eat her food at a sedate pace. The rest of the food was quickly consumed following the ravenous hunger of Naruto. Despite his slower eating, he was still very hungry from his forced fast, and the Akimichi family. Once Naruto had eaten his fill, he sat back and smiled lazily at his newest friend and whispered to him, "Thank you for inviting me over, Shikamaru." Shikamaru just nodded back at Naruto as he sat in his own chair. Shikamaru's eyes darted over to Naruto and an unsual gleam appeared in his eyes as he spoke. "Would you like to play a game, Naruto?" he asked. Naruto's intrigued expression was his answer. "I enjoy playing shogi, I want you to play a match with me," he said to his friend. The adults and Choji had disbelieving expressions on their faces. The only person to beat Shikamaru was Shikaku, and Naruto was not exactly the brightest shinobi in the world. The parents knew of his academy performance. "I don't know how to play, Shikamaru. Can you teach me?" Naruto asked curiously. Though he knew shogi was a boring game, he didn't want to deny playing a game with his friend, especially since he said he wanted to play with him. Practically a first for Naruto. Shikamaru nodded his head and looked up at the table, waiting for everyone else to finish eating, only to notice that everyone had their attention on them. Shikamaru shifted uncomfortably as his father opened his mouth to deny Naruto playing against him, but Naruto came to the rescue. "Why did we come over here to eat, Yoshino-san?" Naruto asked curiously. The adults looked a bit nervous, but Hamiko saved the day. "They wanted you to taste my awesome cooking. Now tell me that my food is definitely better than that ramen," she shouted to break the awkwardness of the situation. Naruto's eyes seemed to come alight as he looked at Hamiko. "Never," he said as if committing a mutiny. Yoshino smiled slightly and looked at Shikamaru and Choji. "Why don't you two go set up the game so we can talk to Naruto-chan?" she asked sweetly. Shikamaru's eyes narrowed and Shikaku noticed it. He waved his son off and Shikamaru got the hint as he grabbed Choji and left the room to set up the board for shogi. Naruto seemed to grow in his chair as his happy persona almost vanished, replaced with the look of a veteran shinobi hardened by years of service. "I don't care if you don't like me, just don't hurt your kids for playing with me," he said in a serious voice. The adults all smiled sadly at him. Yoshino spoke again. We are not mad at you, Naruto-chan. If you wish to be friends with Shikamaru, that is his decision. We will not hold him back from assisting you, she said, smiling at him. Chusa spoke up as well. Choji is the same. We are not bigots, Naruto-san. We may not have been able to help you well enough in your childhood, but we have something to help you now. Naruto's serious expression turned into one of confusion, and the tension in the room disappeared as his attitude changed from a beaten and depressed aura to one of almost childlike wonder. What did you do? He asked eagerly. Hamiko spoke in a quiet tone. When we saw how malnourished you were, Naruto. Naruto's eyes snapped to Yoshino and Shikaku. Yes, they told us. But that is because the Akimichi are known as the masters of food. We are the ones ninja come to in order to devise a diet for training or for targeting specific areas of their bodies. Naruto looked up at the Akimichi with a bit of respect. While the Naras are the ones with the best medicinal herbs and medicines made from their deer's antlers. Naruto's look turned to confusion. But what has this got to do with what we ate? He asked loudly. Hamiko shushed him for speaking so loudly. Shikaka spoke now. The food we all ate tonight are double in the amount of nutrition it will give to us. In other words, since you ate this, you will be getting as if you ate for the last 3 days without actually having eaten it. It is unhealthy for a ninja to be as scrawny as you are. This concoction is used for ninja who have been starved in interrogation or for ninja who return to the village dehydrated and malnourished. It will help you gain some fat and be able to work your body better, Shikaku explained. Naruto's eyes widened as he remembered what Kurenai had said about eating healthier. But this is only temporary, you need to eat more than ramen. It is not healthy to eat this concoction for extended periods of time. Chusa said. Naruto's head fell and he mumbled something under his breath. He only understood half of what had been said. Basically, this food was good for him, but he couldn't eat it all the time. He was happy they had helped, but he couldn't afford anything but ramen. Yoshino's Oni mask reappeared. Naruto-chan, what did you say? She asked. Naruto, feeling the ki from Yoshino, quickly popped to attention in his seat and said quietly, I can't afford anything else. A quick glance around the table had a nod from Chusa and a grateful smile from Yoshino. Then you will come eat in Akimichi restaurants from now on, Naruto-san. I cannot allow my son's friend to be so unfit for shinobi duty. It is against my clan's purpose within Konoha. For the next week, we will keep feeding you food with this concoction so that you may regain some weight. But that is the limit. Chusa said, earning a teary-eyed Naruto. Hantoni? He asked, trembling. Chusa smiled and nodded his head while saying, for free. For the first week, Naruto-san, but after that, you will have to pay. The big man was suddenly set upon by a blur of gray and burnt orange crashing into him and hugging him tightly as Naruto fought tears. The man merely patted his back as the adults shared a sad smile at such a small courtesy meaning so much to the small one in front of them. Naruto, the board is set. Shikamaru called from outside the house. Naruto smiled and wiped his face with a towel offered from Hamiko, and the group left to find Chuji and Shikamaru sitting on the porch leading to the backyard with a shogi board in front of Shikamaru. Naruto withheld a grimace as he despised board games. He preferred to be running around, but he was feeling kinda sleepy since he had eaten his fill. So, he plopped down on the opposite side of the board and said, So, how does this work? Naruto asked. With those words, Shikamaru set to teaching Naruto how to play shogi and how each piece moved as well as the rules. Once he was done, "Want to try one game, Naruto?" he asked. Naruto's face was in a scrunched-up expression, indicating him trying to focus extremely hard on something. The two females were restraining from grabbing him and hugging him to death, screaming kawaii. After a few more moments, Naruto nodded and motioned for Shikamaru to begin the game. Shikamaru nodded and the game of minds began. 3 turns later, Shikamaru was in his thinking position, causing everyone but Naruto to be gaping at the board as they tried to figure out what Naruto was doing. Shikamaru only used his thinking pose when he needed to plan almost thousands of moves ahead. A few moments later, Shikamaru moved his piece with Naruto following suit almost immediately. 5 turns later, Shikamaru sat in his thinking pose again, trying to figure out Naruto's ploy as Shikaku sat next to the board and kept giving heated glares to Naruto. What no one could understand was why Shikaku was so frustrated. He's got no strategy, but his luck is out of this world. If I wasn't sure he didn't know what he was doing, I would assume he was a master. Shikaku screamed in his head. 25 turns later, Shikamaru moved his final piece and said, "Game." Naruto's eyebrows furrowed and he stared at the board intently. Shikamaru's face was sweating lightly from all the calculations he put into the game. He knew Naruto was good. But this was ridiculous. Again, Naruto said and began rearranging the pieces. Shikamaru smiled slightly and said, "Sure." This match lasted 60 turns before Shikamaru moved his piece into position and repeated, "Game." Naruto's eyebrows furrowed again and a frustrated look appeared on his face. "Again," he said forcefully and began rearranging the pieces. Shikamaru sighed but complied and the group around them sat in stunned silence for the next match. At turn 100, Naruto moved his piece and said, "Game." Confidently, Shikaku and Shikamaru blinked and looked at the board before looking back at Naruto. Chuji, Chuza, Hamiko, and Yoshino all had their jaws on the ground as Shikamaru held his hand out. "I have never had anyone my age beat me before, Naruto. Good game," he said as Naruto shook his hand with a huge smile on his face. "That was actually fun. Can we do that again?" he asked. Shikamaru smiled and nodded his head, glad to have someone other than his father or Asuma to play against. Naruto looked up at the sky and noticed it was starting to get dark. "I think I should head home," he said. "It's getting late and I need to go to sleep." The group agreed with him and Shikamaru packed up his board while everyone else got ready. Chuji and his family waved at Naruto and the Nara family as they walked away. Naruto with one last invite to come eat in the Akimichi clan restaurants. As they were walking, Naruto recalled that he had often been thrown out of restaurants, but he had never come into the clan district. It was too far away. He smiled as he walked down the street heading to the fork in the road that would lead to the central hub and indicate the separating of him and his new friend. It had been a great ending to a horrible realization. But he was determined to remain positive and kept his happy feelings as they neared the fork. "Naruto," Shikamaru started gaining his attention. "Where could I find you? Say 3 tomorrow afternoon?" he asked. Naruto scratched his head as he grinned. "Probably around training ground 7, he replied. Shikamaru nodded and smiled as they reached the fork in the road. "Well, it was nice meeting you, Naruto. I'll be by tomorrow with a few things you will probably like," he said cryptically before he shook Naruto's hand. "What is it?" Naruto shouted while holding onto Shikamaru's hand firmly. He wouldn't let go until Shikamaru told him. Shikamaru chuckled. "I will only tell you tomorrow, Naruto. I need to look at some stuff for you." He explained a bit. Naruto's eyes squinted, but he finally nodded and let go of Shikamaru before turning and bowing to Yoshino and Shikaku. He thanked them for dinner before turning and beginning to walk home. Once he was out of earshot, Shikamaru turned to his parents. "We need to talk," he said, his usually lazy voice displaying a level of seriousness they never knew he had. Shikaku and Yoshino sighed. Having a genius child creates a lot of problems. Scene break. Naruto looked up at the darkening sky as he walked into his apartment. "Today was nice. I wonder when I will see Kurenai-san again," he thought as he closed his door and proceeded to his bedroom. Scene break. Naruto walked down the street leading to his team's meeting bridge. A bright smile adorned his face as he walked through the village. He was remaining true to what he had discovered yesterday. He would be the same him as always, just trying to lessen his attempts with his teammates. So, he walked through the village, his fake smile plastered on his face as he was allowing his thoughts to run wild. "I wonder what Kurenai-san is doing?" his mind came up with first. He shook his head as he smiled a bitter smile. "Probably teaching her team. Not that Kakashi-sensei trains us in anything." He reached a distance where he could pick out his teammates standing on the bridge, and a wave of disappointment and sadness washed through him. If this could be called a team, he thought to himself. He let his eyes wander to the clouds in the sky and his fake smile was replaced with a small smile of happiness. "What is Shikamaru gonna bring me?" he thought to himself. "I hope it's training books. Oh, I bet it's going to be some awesome jutsus." Naruto's normal exuberance shining through as he thought of learning flashy jutsus and defeating his enemies while finally arriving at the bridge. He opened his mouth, his previous exuberance still in effect as he shouted, "Ohio Sakura, Sasuke." Though he was still his normally loud self, He did not add the affectionate Chan to the end of Sakura's name because of her actions leading up to this point. Naruto's exuberance was smashed as Sasuke and Sakura gave their usual greetings. Achin. Sasuke grunted before ignoring him again. Sakura, on the other hand, marched over to him and smacked him on the back of the head as he smiled at his team. He never saw it coming as he felt dirt enter his mouth and looked up to see Sakura with eyes almost burning with what she believed to be righteous fury. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Sasuke looking back over at him with his usual Uchiha pride, but the smirk on his face was unmistakable. Naruto's heart clenched as Sakura began to speak. "You baka!" she shouted at him. "Because of you, our whole day yesterday was wasted and we couldn't take any missions." She berated him as Naruto's eyes turned to an almost icy blue. Naruto dusted himself off and turned around. "I'm not done with you," Sakura shouted and reached out to turn him back around. Only Kakashi's arrival, 2.5 hours early, saved her from being struck with Naruto's clawed hands. Unknown to Sasuke or Sakura, Kakashi had seen Naruto's eyes flash red as his two teammates continued to berate him for not being there the day before. He had not come up with an answer about what to do with his team when Naruto had appeared today and greeted them. He had smiled under his mask when he heard Naruto's loud shout even without the affectionate term for Sakura. His plan for their teamwork could still work without his infatuation of Sakura. In fact, he had been even happier to see that Naruto had given up on her as he didn't like his sensei's son being abused by the pinkette. That didn't make him stop her though. If Naruto wanted to allow her to hit him, it was not his place to tell him otherwise. Only if it would hurt their team dynamic, despite any personal feelings, would he interfere with their relationships. The love triangle that the team had was not important enough for him to address just yet. He felt they would grow out of their crushes as they matured and it would only be worked through with time. "Mama, Sakura-chan. Naruto must have a good reason for leaving us early yesterday," Kakashi said from behind Sakura. Sakura whirled around with wide eyes. Even Sasuke was staring at their early sensei, while Naruto's hands were clenching and unclenching as his hands turned back to normal. After a few moments, Naruto turned back around and looked at Kakashi with icy blue eyes. Kakashi's single eye widened, but Sakura and Sasuke did not see it as they tried to comprehend that Kakashi was actually there. Kakashi almost took a step back from the likeness of his sensei in Naruto's face. The only thing stopping him was the fact that this was Naruto. Instantly, Kakashi's mind went into overdrive as he took in this latest complication for his team. "Shit, I thought we could salvage this, but it seems Naruto has had enough of it. This is bad, especially with what I saw earlier. I'm gonna have to step in if it gets out of hand. If his eyes flash red again, I am bringing him to Hokage-sama for the seal to be checked." He thought to himself as all his plans for teamwork went flying out the proverbial window. Plus, it seems this team will never work together. Kakashi withheld his sigh as he eye-smiled at Naruto. "What are we doing today, Kakashi-sensei?" Naruto asked without his usual exuberance. Sasuke's eyes darted to Naruto's and only his pride kept him from shivering at the cold look within them. He instantly knew something was wrong. He had thought, just as Kakashi did, that because he was his usual self, Naruto was fine, but this action only proved that it was far from the truth. The Naruto he knew would never have such an uncaring look in his eyes, as if his teammates meant nothing to him, as if they did not exist except as things you might pass over when walking around, such as a twig or a bush. He hated that look. The look that said, "You are beneath me," and more. It was so alike Itachi's eyes on that night. Sasuke shivered and turned away from his comrade, his closest friend, the person who understood him best, despite him not acknowledging it. Sakura was woefully oblivious to Naruto's gaze as she simply yelled at him before turning to face Kakashi. "So, what's the excuse?" she shouted. Naruto simply ignored her as he stared into Kakashi's eye, awaiting the answer to his question. Kakashi mentally shivered but said, "All right, I need to talk to Naruto. Sakura-chan, Sasuke, please head to the Hokage Tower and wait for us so we can pick up our mission for the day." He turned to them and eye-smiled as he mentally prepared himself for this talk. His tone of voice was polite, but it was obviously in order. Sakura's face lit up as she heard she would be alone with her crush. It was slightly dampened by the annoyance she felt towards Naruto. Though she found him an annoyance, She did wonder what would possess him to leave their training early. He had always been one to love training, always asking for more. But she quickly brushed that aside as she nodded to her sensei before turning and looking for Sasuke, only to find he had already started walking away from the bridge. Sasuke didn't wait around. He was glad to escape such a gaze, had it registered that it was Naruto who was the owner of said gaze. He might have become angry, but the reappearance of those memories kept him from realizing this fact, and so he simply escaped so he could sort out his confused thoughts. As his two teammates left, Naruto's icy blue eyes seemed to regain their usual brightness as he leaned against the bridge's railing and looked over the river underneath their bridge. He didn't look up at his sensei as Kakashi leaned against the rail next to him. Naruto's mind was in turmoil. He couldn't believe how his teammates treated him. He had greeted them happily and they had ignored him, in Sasuke's case, or beat him before berating him, in Sakura's case. Neither of them checked to see if it might have been something wrong, as people who care about others usually did. Neither of them even thought he might have a good reason for walking off, regardless of the fact he didn't. It was the principle of the matter. His eyes stung as tears threatened to come to his eyes, but he blinked them back. Naruto's resolve set in stone before Kakashi even spoke. He would never attempt to help his teammates, outside of practice. Again, Kakashi sighed as he stood next to Naruto. He couldn't tell what the blonde was thinking, and it scared him. He was usually a good reader. He could almost always tell what a person was feeling or the direction of their thoughts. When he had gotten the Sharingan, it had only improved his already keen insight. This was the reason he was able to fight S-rank ninja. The reason he was S-rank himself when he used his Sharingan. But this Naruto had somehow managed to go from a complete open book 2 days ago to an unreadable ninja in the same time. Kakashi looked down, saddened that this had happened, but he knew he needed to speak with Naruto for this team to work. Naruto, Kakashi began slowly. "What's wrong?" he asked. Naruto didn't even look up as he answered his sensei in a fake happy voice that almost had Kakashi fooled. "Nothing, Kakashi-sensei. What did you want to speak about?" Kakashi wasn't fooled. He could see something was bothering Naruto, and it was affecting the team's teamwork. He sighed before standing away from the railing and facing Naruto with the full force of his presence bearing down on his student. "Naruto, whatever is happening with you has been affecting the team's efficiency and ability to work together," Kakashi stated in a firm tone, the first time Naruto had seen him be serious about something. Still, Naruto did not look up at his sensei as he contemplated what Kakashi was saying. "I try to keep from invading your personal lives, but when it comes to this team, you need to be able to work with your teammates, and obviously, something from your life is affecting that. I need you to tell me what that is," Kakashi said. Still, Naruto would not look up. Naruto heard everything that his sensei was saying, but he was mentally screaming in his head. "This isn't a team, and you do not teach us anything." As his mind replayed the events on the bridge for the past 2 days, he cringed slightly when he thought of the overwhelming sense of hate that had emanated from himself when Sakura had reached out to touch him again. He, somehow, knew he had tapped into that forbidden and evil chakra laying dormant inside him. He shivered as he thought of the unrestrained bloodlust that had engulfed him when he had only barely touched the vast ocean that was Kyuubi. Though he had managed to keep a lid on the feelings so his team wouldn't see or sense anything, he had bore the full brunt of the feeling. That was why he could almost shrug off Kakashi's presence even while he was standing so close to him. The lingering feeling of Kyuubi's oppressive nature overshadowing anything his sensei could provide. Kakashi waited for Naruto to answer, but when there was no visible effect of his words, Kakashi resorted to something he had hoped never to use against the blonde, Naruto. He stated, his voice firm and carrying a tone of authority that had not been there before, the tone of an ANBU captain. "I am going to have to suspend your ninja license if you cannot tell me what is wrong." Here, Naruto's air of fake happiness and restrained disappointment turned to one of shock. Naruto could not see the frown on Kakashi's face. "It will be suspended until such a time that a mental fortitude test can be taken and a ninja psychiatrist has deemed you fit to return to duty. Your attack on your comrade earlier today shows that you need help, and if you are not willing to talk to me, then I must, as your sensei, protect you and my other students," he said. Naruto finally turned to look at his sensei. His eyes still had that shine from before, but Kakashi could see the hint of icy blue beneath them. Naruto stared into Kakashi's lone eye for a few seconds before his eyes turned icy cold again, and Kakashi mentally cringed. Wrong move, Kakashi. He thought to himself. Team. Naruto stated incredulously. This is no team, Kakashi-sensei. Kakashi's eye widened. If I am to be brought to the psychiatrist, then Sakura should be sent for repeatedly attacking me outside of a spar, and the Uchiha should be sent on counts of insubordination as he constantly ignores you. Naruto said in an odd voice. Our teamwork is horrible, but you already knew that, didn't you? He questioned rhetorically. You are even worse, Naruto said while pointing at Kakashi. You don't teach us anything and you expect us to work together simply because we were put on the same team. Kakashi's eye hardened, but Naruto didn't seem to notice. I will no longer attempt to make friends with my teammates. Kakashi's eye widened slightly, but the fierce gleam in his eye told anyone that he would have words about this. They do not want my friendship. During missions and team exercises, I will attempt to work together, but outside of that, this team is dead, and it is a disappointment to the will of fire Gigi speaks of. Naruto said as he glared into his sensei's shocked eyes. Naruto blinked and his eyes seemed to lose some of its iciness. He looked shocked that he had said everything he did, but he shrugged it off before nodding his head and turning to walk away. Kakashi looked down, saddened that Naruto actually thought that. But he was adamant that his teaching methods were the correct path. Their teamwork needs the most work, and he was going to make sure that they worked as a cohesive unit when working on missions. His eye picked out Naruto as he vanished into the crowd of people heading to the Hokage Tower. He shook his head, deciding to consult the Hokage before making any further decisions regarding Naruto. He disappeared in a swirl of leaves to meet his team at the tower for their mission. Scene break. Naruto plastered a big smile on his face as he walked towards the Hokage Tower, leaving his sensei behind. He didn't know why he said all those things. He had no idea he even thought that until just now when he voiced them. He mentally frowned as he realized that he had not actually contemplated saying those things until Kakashi had threatened him. Despite this, he could not figure out why he had said such hurtful things. His team may not be perfect, but they were still decent companions when they were forced to work together, right? You know exactly why you said those things, Naruto. An ethereal voice whispered to Naruto. Naruto stopped and his eyes unfocused as he was caught by surprise. He looked around swiftly, his blonde locks swishing in the air as he tried to find the source of the voice. Who's there? He asked quietly. His eyes darted around trying to find his opponent. Show yourself! He almost yelled, drawing the glares of the populace to him. Naruto immediately looked sheepish from all of the glares and scratched the back of his head in embarrassment as he smiled at them all. Most just scoffed and muttered under their breath before continuing their walk. The others continued to glare at him as he started to walk again. Naruto walked through the village with little care in the world, as the incident with the voice had been written off as Naruto's lack of sleep because he was getting up earlier than normal for practices. Naruto continued towards the Hokage Tower, completely ignoring the little voice in the back of his head that sounded like it let go an exasperated sigh. Scene break. Naruto walked onto Training Ground 7 with a smile on his face as he noticed that Shikamaru was already there. He put the horrible D-rank mission behind him. His team had been forced to capture Tora the cat again, and they had spent most of the day attempting to catch it. Oddly enough, Naruto had been the one to capture Tora, and upon petting the demonic kitten, the thing had turned into a motorboat as it purred all the way to the Hokage Tower while sitting docilely in Naruto's arms. True to his word, Naruto had worked well with his teammates, at least as well as was possible with their current teamwork, and the mission had gone rather smoothly. Kakashi had seemed mildly shocked but still not happy. Naruto had all but crushed his loudmouth nature next to his teammates through sheer willpower alone. It had created an awkward tension between the team, but they had worked together nonetheless. Naruto couldn't be happier. As Naruto drew closer, however, his smile faded as he saw a pile of books sitting next to Shikamaru. By the time he was near Shikamaru, he was eyeing the books with a wary eye as he greeted his friend, whose amused expression did not bode well for Naruto. Konnichiwa, Shikamaru. Naruto greeted loudly as he grinned happily despite the growing feeling of dread forming in the pit of his stomach. Konnichiwa, Naruto, Shikamaru said in his usual lazy drawl. He withheld the smirk that threatened to come to his lips as he saw Naruto eye the pile of books beside him with disdain. He knew Naruto was not very good at reading books, but he had made sure, After a long talk with his parents about what he could remove from their library, the books were fairly easy on the comprehension needed. I brought you a few things I thought you might like, he said to Naruto. Naruto's eyes widened and he started to jump on the balls of his feet. Nani? Is it some cool jutsu that we can use to burn those books? He said while pointing at Shikamaru's pile of books. Naruto's smile was ear-splitting. Shikamaru's sweat dropped. How can he be so serious and down to Konoha one moment while being completely out the village the next? He questioned to himself before looking at Naruto and shaking his head. No, he said, which prompted Naruto to stand still and begin to glare at the books. I brought you some books on what I think would help you immensely, he said. Naruto turned to Shikamaru with a full-on pout. Mao, but I hate reading, he complained. Shikamaru sighed and with a muttered troublesome, began to hand each book over to Naruto one at a time, as he watched Naruto grab them reluctantly. Shinobi Rules, Basic Chakra Control plus Advanced Methods for those with large reserves. History of Konoha, How to Train, Genjutsu for Beginners, were the 5 books that Shikamaru handed to him. Naruto's eyebrows furrowed as he looked at them. He opened his mouth and exclaimed, What would I need History of Konoha for? He asked. History won't teach me how to be a better ninja, he exclaimed. Shikamaru almost frowned but replied, It will teach you how to use that mind of yours, Naruto, he said while chuckling at his own joke. Naruto pouted. I can do just fine without this, thanks, he said as he was about to hand the book back. Shikamaru decided to play his trump card. But did you know there was a passage about a clan named Uzumaki? He asked quietly. He knew Naruto did not know who his parents were. As such, he was hesitant to bring up the information. He shouldn't have been worried as Naruto's eyes widened, and he almost dropped the book before trying to rush through the pages to look at his own clan. Shikamaru smiled slightly as he knew Naruto would be interested then. He looked on as Naruto almost tore a page out of the book and decided to stop his frenzy. I know you're eager, Naruto, but there are some other books. Besides, you get to keep these, he said while smirking. Naruto's face lit up like a light bulb when he heard he owned something his friend had given to him. He smiled broadly at Shikamaru, his book left laying in his hands as he thanked his friend. Arigato, Shikamaru, Naruto said. Shikamaru nodded and waved at the other books. Any other questions? He asked lazily as he slouched down and could feel the need for Cloud watching reappear. Naruto looked at the rest of them before saying, What's this about Genjutsu? He asked, which caused Shikamaru's bored expression to go right back to interested. I want to blow someone up, not try to get into their brains, he complained loudly. Shikamaru merely leaned back against a tree trunk and said, This is probably the best branch of shinobi arts you can use, Naruto, he said. Naruto's eyes narrowed and he replied, he said. Gigi said that I would be perfect for ninjutsu. Shikamaru nodded his head, acceding to the old man's point but disagreed. Naruto, your mind is a veritable maze of crazy ideas. As a result, you are not the smartest of us, he said, drawing a pout from Naruto. However, when the going gets tough, you always seem to come up with some plan or some action that manages to bring you to complete your task better than anyone else can, he explained as he finally looked straight into Naruto's eyes. Genjutsu would be the perfect area for you as you would be able to create your own jutsu, he explained. Naruto's face had gone from pouting to excitement at hearing him make his own jutsu. On top of that, with all of your ideas, you would be the most versatile shinobi since the Yondaime Hokage. Naruto's eyes widened. Time for the icing on the cake. Plus, so few people think that Genjutsu is any good. He started drawing Naruto's attention back to him from his excitement. It is said that being a Genjutsu master is a waste of time, and that only the weakest of shinobi would study this, Shikamaru said, drawing a thoughtful look from Naruto. It is said that to be a master of illusions would be a waste of time and that anyone could beat them. No one ever takes Genjutsu seriously. Naruto frowned, about to ask why he should even try it then. So, imagine what everyone would think when you manage to be the most powerful ninja in this village with a specialization in something that everyone else sees as worthless? Shikamaru finished with a smirk on his face, knowing that would stoke Naruto's flames. Shikamaru knew Naruto craved acknowledgement. From everything Naruto had told him, he had easily picked out that aspect of Naruto. So, he knew that phrasing his explanation about why Genjutsu would be the perfect way to get Naruto to take it up. He was not lying and trying to make him use the wrong branch of jutsu. He truly believed that Naruto would be perfect with Genjutsu. His extremely analytical mind while within combat would be an asset to any aspiring Genjutsu users. Additionally, Naruto's pranks showed that he had a creative mind, and this would put that creativity to use instead of it being squandered by preset ninjutsus that Naruto would be consistently firing off. On top of all of that, Naruto's stealth was phenomenal. If Naruto used his stealth in combination with even a basic sense-altering Genjutsu, Naruto would be one of the greatest assassins the world had ever seen. Knowing Naruto would crave acknowledgement, Shikamaru planned to make him a Genjutsu master on par with Kurenai. He knew that taking advantage of Naruto's craving for acknowledgement might be considered unfriendly, but Shikamaru was using it to Naruto's own advantage as, if he was useful with Genjutsu, then any ninjutsu he learned would be excess as he wouldn't have to rely on them as most ninja did. He was hoping to make Naruto into an unstoppable force on the battlefield and help him achieve his goal of being Hokage. Shikamaru was smart enough to know that Naruto's natural charisma, which had managed to spark his own curiosity, would benefit Konoha best from within the Hokage position. That is not to say he was doing this for Konoha. Naruto wished it, and it just so happened to coincide nicely for Konoha's future. Should Naruto decide to give up on being Hokage, Shikamaru would support his decision. After all, Shikamaru was more of a friend than he would ever be a shinobi. Naruto's eyes roared with a fire from within him as he looked at Shikamaru's smirk. "They don't think that Genjutsu is any good?" he stated incredulously. "I'll show them," he proclaimed as he raised his fist to the air. "I will become a master of Genjutsu and then become Hokage to show them all that Genjutsu isn't worthless," he shouted. Shikamaru leaned back and smiled a lazy smile. "Then I guess you have no more questions about those books?" he asked. Naruto looked back at Shikamaru and grinned foxily. "Nope. Arigato Shikamaru," he said loudly. Shikamaru simply nodded lazily. "If you need any more books, Naruto, just ask," he said before starting to walk away. "You can come eat dinner any time at my house. My troublesome mother has invited you," he said as he left the training grounds. Naruto smiled and looked down at his books. He was eager to read about his clan, but the Genjutsu book as well. Kurenai-san is a master of Genjutsu. I wonder if... He thought to himself, "Nah, she already denied me. I will train by myself. Besides, she has her own team. I will prove that Genjutsu is useful." That was part of the reason he had agreed with Shikamaru at the end of his speech, unknown to the boy himself. Naruto had remembered that Kurenai was a master of Genjutsu, and he would be damned if her art was looked down upon. Naruto suddenly smiled foxily, his mind already coming up with different ways to use illusions. After all, this was the same mind that came up with the Oiroke no Jutsu.